Can you guys hear me well? Everything's good? So, I present to you guys the Urban Energy Challenge by yours truly, Cameron Robinson.
It's got to be clicked on. Oh, you got it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so, sure you guys can guess what the problem is based on this picture. Pollution, right? So, as I'm sure most of you guys know, I love big cities like New York City. Chris disagrees with that. But so as these big cities grow with New York City and the populations increase, so do the energy demands. So as you can see at night, cities are powered and there's lots of light, skyscrapers, and like that. So our current power systems, they rely heavily on fossil fuels like coal and natural gas. And that's just unsustainable and that pollutes things as you can in this picture. It's AI generated, but you get the point. And so a new solution is needed, which is where my solution, or sort of other people thought of it, but that I thought of was coming in. So if the world continues to depend on these fossil fuels and they create the pollution contributing to climate change, what we need is something that isn't based on centralized power grids and that's not unreliable. So that way when there's a power outage or something, we don't just rely on one power grid and then everything's just blacked out, right? So imagine these roads that not only serve as transportation to get you from point A to point B, but also they can generate energy. So think about it this way: these energy harvesting roads, they can turn these very roads that people travel on into actually decentralized power sources, capturing the kinetic, thermal, and frictional energy from three different materials as we go on to see. And so this innovation, it requires a lot of pretty much every field of engineering, like civil engineers, electrical engineers, materials engineering, and data science to function effectively and efficiently. So now, anyways, so these energy harvesting roads, they're designed to capture, but not even capture it, just convert it into electrical energy that can be used, right? So they're converting the energy from those moving vehicles. Basically, basically, the roads are becoming that source of power, right? So from the moving vehicle's temperature and from the friction that they're creating from just riding the road. So these core technologies, though, these are materials I was talking about. So there's piezoelectric materials, thermoelectric generators, and triboelectric nanogenerators, which is pretty cool. We'll get to that in a minute. So the piezoelectric materials. So I had another idea that we've been working on that is basically use piezoelectric materials to create energy as you walk. So they're like insoles, right? This idea is different than that though, because now instead of walking, you're actually in a car and you're going on the road, but it's different than an accumulator. Now, instead, when pressure is applied to the road, that's actually creating energy, right? So as these vehicles move over the roads, the materials compress and then they generate energy. And we'll get into that, how that works in a minute. For now, we're just on the overview. And then the thermoelectric generators. This one's really cool because it's not just pressure. This is now applying heat of the car. So as you know, when you see in a car, you see the temperature under the wheel, right? So that temperature in the wheel will actually convert how much power you have now. So these systems, they can convert heat from the road or vehicle exhaust into electricity, which is really cool. And again, we'll see how that works in a minute. And then finally, the coolest one, I think, triboelectric nanogenerators. So these capture electricity from just friction of the car moving on the road, like the interaction between just vehicles, and, like, tires, and the road surface. So those are all really cool. And again, you see how they work in there. But now we can go into the advantages of this versus our normal power sources like coal and natural gas. So these energy harvesting roads, they offer more localized instead of a giant centralized power plant into a renewable source of power that's sustainable, but it also reduces the reliance on, again, these centralized traditional power grids and fossil fuels like coal and natural gas.
Oh, just hold on.
Oh, okay. So now, so basically, the equation for piezoelectric materials, this is just basic algebra for now, but we've kind of seen an overview of it and how the voltage is actually generated. So obviously, V is the voltage in volts, and then G is the piezoelectric coefficient, which so the piezoelectric coefficient, which is basically it's determining there's different types of materials for piezoelectric materials like lead zirconate titanate, and that one has a higher piezoelectric coefficient because that one is it's not as bendable, right? So things like that, they have different piezoelectric coefficients, and that determines how much energy they can output. So in this equation, it's the voltage it directly correlates to the piezoelectric coefficient. So that's piezoelectric coefficient times the applied force in newtons. So if the vehicle exerts a force of 10,000 newtons and the piezoelectric coefficient is 0.03 volts per newtons, then the voltage is just the piezoelectric coefficient times the actual force applied. And if it applies 10,000 newtons force, then you're getting 300 volts of energy from that one power source, right? And now the thing about these roads, it's not just going to be like every road you drive on, every single millimeter of the road is going to have these power sources. There's going to be different collecting points as so. We'll get to that in the other slide. But for now, that's how the piezoelectric material is the overview of it, basically, and how power is actually generated. Now, in the thermoelectric generators, again going over more of the basic equations for it, the power output in watts equals the thermoelectric efficiency times the heat flow. So the efficiency is 5% or 0.05, and then the heat flow is let's say 1,000 watts, right? So now our equation power output is 0.05, which is the thermoelectric efficiency, times the heat flow, which is 1,000 watts, getting you 50 watts of power.
Do that,
Generated.
support this here. So you had the thesis and the support.
So from there, now the triboelectric nanos generators. So now our equation is the charge generated in columns, and then the sigma, like that, is the triboelectric. Sigma is the triboelectric and in columns per square meter, and then A is the contact area. So our equation is Q equals dad times area. So if it's 0.02 columns per square meter, then the charge generated is 0.002 times 0.5, which gets you about 0.001 columns. So now thinking about all of that, that's the power generated from that one collecting point, right? So there'd be 3 layers, and we're getting to the layer slides, but there's 3 layers basically. Piezoelectric materials on the surface because that's where the pressure being applied is, and then the thermoelectric generators creating the heat, and the thermoelectric generators are actually going to be like inside of the asphalt kind of basically, because that's where the heat is actually being applied and creating the energy. And then finally the triboelectric nano generators, which are going to be on a lower level, and then those again from the friction. So a lot of those they work hand in hand, which is really cool. So now, so I'm going to go through the next 3 slides, piezoelectric technology, and then going through each material. So for now, I'm starting with piezoelectric. So the mechanism, so now actually getting into how they generate power. So the piezoelectric crystals, they generate energy when the pressure is applied, obviously. And the force exerted by these vehicles is from that. Those crystals, they convert into electrical energy from those internal dipole moments when the pressure is actually applied. It creates a spark, basically, which is really cool. So, but in the math version of it, basically, the force is modeled by the vehicle weight, we'll call that W, and then displacement, which is X. But that depends on the road surface response, right? So then the voltage generated, that's going to be V of T equals G, and then, so the format here kind of sucks because I can't really format stuff on a computer. So basically it's G, piezoelectric coefficient times the integral. Now these are values actually, the values of the integral, so it'd be the value T and the value 0, and then the actual equation starts after. It's the df over dx, and then dx, which is what it's related to. So the t and 0 is, I don't know if that makes sense, but those are the values for the integral. So that's the equation, right? That makes sense. That's fine. So then the calculation, making make more sense now. So the truck, the weight is 15,000 newtons, and it moves across a piezoelectric strip of length 3 meters, and the piezoelectric coefficient, which is G in the equation, of 0.2. So now our force distribution is f of x equals W times cosine of pi x times L. So x is the displacement and L is the length. Then displacement per meter is 0.01 mx. The voltage is equal to G times the, so then again, those are the values. So since we have T, it really doesn't make sense when you look at it. Here, let me go on this side. So you guys see my screen. So basically, for the voltage, as I'm looking at under calculation, the 0 and the 3 are both the values. So 0 goes in the bottom of the integral, 3 goes in the top of the integral. And then those are going to be applied later. So now we're starting off 15,000 times cosine of pi times the displacement times 3, and then dx. So now actually solving that, we're getting, again, piezoelectric coefficient hasn't been applied yet, but then now we're actually applying those values. So now you see the 0 and 3 aren't there. Now what we're doing is, since the 0, what you do is you apply the top value and the bottom value, and you subtract them from each other. And since 0, it multiplies everything out, so it's just 0. So minus 0 doesn't really do anything. So all we're doing is multiplying the whole function by 3. So 15,000 times 3 times pi sine of the integral, or not integral, pi of displacement times 3. And you'll notice that cosine switched from sine because we already computed the integral now. When you take the integral of cosine, you're getting sine. So now from there, just basic math now, we haven't applied the piezoelectric coefficient yet, which is g, but now just multiplying 15,000 by the 3 sine of pi times displacement 3, we're getting 45,000 pi. And then from there, multiplying it by the 0.2, we're getting 2,860, oh, I put voltage twice, 2,865 volts. There's 2 B's there, I don't know why that happens. And then now, go back to this side. Now, now we're getting, so that's the calculation, right? That's the example problem. We're going more into the actual calculus behind it and how that works, right? How we're actually creating that energy from the piezoelectric technology. So now the energy storage, though. We created this energy, that's great, but energy doesn't really work if you have no place to store it, right? So the energy storage and the collection. So there's collector points where the piezoelectric strips are in the road. And so these embedded piezoelectric systems in these grids, they're under the asphalt and they connect to these DC capacitors, right? And then the inverter will convert the DC energy into the AC, which is alternating current, and then feeding it into a local substation. So it'd be like basically a collecting point, putting it into a substation for either immediate use, powering something, or storing it in a grid, so grid storage. So this is the piezoelectric part, right? But that's only a third of my idea. Exactly. So it's top layer. So I'm kind of going like order of the layers. Maybe that's the before. Now this side. You can see better. So now we're going into thermoelectric generators for heat capture, right? So vehicle movement, it generates heat, right? We all know that. That's what friction does. But more importantly, friction, the triboelectric nanogenerators, for now we're just focusing on heat. But I'm going to stop right here and say what's cool is that the friction that's creating the heat, so in turn, the friction from the road is powering the thermoelectric generators, and then in turn, from that heat, it's the friction powering the triboelectric nanogenerators. So those two work hand in hand. It's like peanut butter and jelly. So since this vehicle movement creates heat, obviously, now we're creating a temperature gradient across the thermoelectric generator. So the Seebeck effect transforms this gradient into electrical energy. You might be thinking, what's the Seebeck effect? Seebeck effect. Well, I know what that is. So that's the phenomenon where you never saw that. Where a temperature difference between two different conductive or semiconductive materials generates a voltage, right? So it's one of the primary thermoelectric effects, and it's the foundation of thermoelectric generators in general, right? So that's really important to this. So now, getting into the math side of it, I should explain what the Seebeck effect is. Seebeck, I can't say that right, Seebeck effect. So now, the actual math part behind it. So P equals that, again, thermoelectric efficiency, times A, the contact area, times K, times delta V, times D, times dA. So that's basically the integral what that's relating to, right? In respect to. So now that's where the delta T is the gradient and A is the thermoelectric generator surface area. So again, another example. So now that we know the actual formula behind it and what the Seebeck effect is and how that power is generated, now an example. So let's say there's a 5 square meter thermoelectric generator with the K equals 0.25 watts per meters over K, right? And then the delta T equals 30 K over M, and then the thermoelectric efficiency is 0.07. So now subbing all those values that we have back into the formula, now we're solving for power, right? So what's the power outputted? So again, we have our thermoelectric efficiency of 0.07 times the integral, and then, so again, this is weird. So these are the values of the integral of 0 and the 50, but again, it doesn't really make sense. But basically what you're doing now is you're multiplying everything in the integral, obviously. But before you do that, you have to take the actual integral, right? So now what you're left with from that integral is 0.07, which is the outside, times 5 times 7.5. So from there, again, multiplying the thermoelectric efficiency back into the equation, you're getting 2.625 watts outputted from the power of the vehicle movement. So I thought that was pretty cool because now we're actually explaining how the power is being outputted and then what power is actually being outputted. So now, we'll go back to this side. You guys can hear me better. Wait, let's do this. Wait,
Talk to
yeah,
yeah.
okay. One sec. So now the energy storage and collection. Once again, same thing for the piezoelectric one, but this one for the thermoelectric generators. We created this power, and we know how much power is being outputted. Where's the energy going to go? So again, now these thermoelectric generators, they're connected to thermal reservoirs and microinverters. So basically, what those do is they channel energy directly into a battery bank, and then the waste heat is dissipated through heat sinks. So it's different than the piezoelectric the piezoelectric energy because now it's being into a battery bank instead of an energy instead of a power station substation. So it's different how their power is being outputted and then how the power is being stored. It's pretty cool. Now the thermoelectric generators and the triboelectric nano generators, those two play hand in hand. So you'll see how the power is outputted in a similar way. Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So now again, triboelectric nano generators. This is all about kinetic energy and friction, right? So kinetic energy, I mean, of the kinetic energy of moving vehicles, it's mainly converted to, not mainly, I'd say partially converted to electrical energy from those triboelectric interactions, right? So we all know what the formula for kinetic energy is. It's 1/2 times mass times velocity squared, right? So from there, the energy converted by those thermoelectric nano, or not, triboelectric nano generators depends on the velocity, right? So V of x. So our formula, once again, we have Q of T, which is the heat flow, equals, okay, again, it doesn't really make sense. So the T and the zero there for sigma or dad is, so the T would be on the top of the integral and then zero on the bottom. So then those are the values, right? So it really starts at sigma times on d of x times f of x times d of x. So that makes sense. So now in the example, so now that we know again how the power is being generated and how the power is actually what the formula is for that power. Now let's say for a car of mass like 1,500 kilograms, let's say now going into different units now. So now the velocity is 20 meters per second, and the surface charge density is dad equals 0.003 coulombs per meter squared, and then friction, the f of x, so that's what that function is 600 newtons, right? So now going back to our formula, we have the charge generated, which is Q, equals again. So now the 20 meters per second, the 0 and that 20, they're going on top and bottom of the integral, right? So what those are doing now, we have the 0.003 times 20 times 600 dx. So then from there, all you're doing is multiplying that and then solving the integral, which is really basic. All you pretty much doing is just multiplying here. And then from there, you're getting the charge generated, which is 72 coulombs. So now we know again how the energy is being powered, and then how the energy is being created, and then how much energy is being outputted. We still run into the same problem. How are we going to get that into somewhere? Like we can't just leave energy laying in the road. That's not how it works. So we have to actually store the energy somewhere, right? So again, these triboelectric nanogenerator arrays, they connect to supercapacitors, so kind of like thermoelectric generators, but instead now it's for rapid storage. And then the energy sent through inductive power transfer, and then to the main grid or to like on-road applications for immediate use, like streetlights. So these can be used for all different applications, but they're all outputted different ways and they're all created different ways. But they all work hand in hand and they're all in the same three layers, which is really cool. So now, moving on, do that every time. So now, again, we've already seen each one of the layers, but now how will this actually work? How are these actually being powered? How are these being outputted? How is everything happening? So since these are now we went over the actual three layers, but now going into the three layers of how they actually work instead of just saying piezoelectric, thermoelectric, triboelectric nanogenerators. The three layers are actually, so the first one for the piezoelectric is a sensing layer. So again, piezoelectric coefficient or piezoelectric crystals, they're used for like pressure plates kind of. So let's say you're trying to let's go Indiana Jones here. So you step on a pressure plate in front of the little thing where the gold ball is, wherever he grabs. And once he steps on that pressure plate and the ball's on the pressure plate, he takes it off. That's what the piezoelectric crystals are coming in. They're sensing how the weight going on and off, and it's creating energy to release the giant ball that chases him. If you guys don't know, I'm sure you do. So from there, the sensing layer is those piezoelectric crystals, the thermoelectric modules, and then the triboelectric nanogenerators. They all collect the energy, right? But then the conversion layer, so now this is where the energy is being actually converted into storable energy. So it's the AC/DC conversion, alternating current, direct current, and that conversion and the energy optimization occur here. And then finally, I'd say the most important layer, distribution layer. So now, again, smart grid technology has to ensure that the seamless energy integration in the power network, right? So that's to make sure that the energy that's already been converted actually gets into its final destination spots. So it's being transferred into the main grid, into these substations. So things like that. So now these piezoelectric crystals, going back into the piezoelectric part of things, those generate pulses of direct current energy. So those pulses are stored in high capacity supercapacitors, right? And then those are smoothed via the direct current converters for consistent voltage output, right? So that's how that distribution layer is actually distributing the piezoelectric power. So now these thermoelectric modules going into the second layer, they directly store the DC energy in thermal reservoirs for later use. So, and then finally, the third layer, the triboelectric nanogenerators, they output the alternating current energy and they're converted using microinverters, right? So then there's nodes that are installed around every kilometer and they're equipped with these smart lot systems to monitor and optimize the energy flow. And then inductive power transfer modules, again, to wirelessly feed the grid of where that power is being outputted. And then finally, so now going into how this is all being outputted, that aggregated energy that's routed to the substations, kind of like where the piezoelectric is being outputted. So the substations for the underground cables. So, and then the excess energy is stored in these grid scale batteries, and then for the peak demand use, right? So it can be used for different things, not just overhead like street lights and being powering buildings and stuff. It can now be used for subway systems, things like that, faster rails, so a lot of those kind of concepts. And then now, this. You guys can go. Okay, so now, basically, now we have all this energy that's being outputted, right? So as we saw in this, all that energy is being outputted and being distributed to different areas, like substations, underground, going through main grids, things like that, right? So that energy generated from the piezoelectric elements is proportional to that force. And so that depends on the traffic density, which is P of X on the T. And now it's kind of going into the Runge-Kutta method a little bit and defining the relationship between X and T. And so now we're going to kind of physics almost. So now the energy generated, again, so now that first integral where you see E equals the integral of 0L, 0 is supposed to be in the bottom, L is supposed to be on the top. So it's a double integral here using the Runge-Kutta method. So 0 on the bottom, L at the top. And then the second integral, besides that, is 0 is supposed to be at the bottom, T at the top. And then K times F of X on T dx dt. That's the actual equation. So 0 and T is on bottom and top, 0 L bottom. That's that equation. And then again, describing each coefficient or not variable. So now K obviously is the piezoelectric efficiency factor, and then energy per unit force. And then F of X on the T is describing that relationship between X and T in the Runge-Kutta method, and then describing the power output of X on the T, and then times V times the piezoelectric coefficient times M. And then P of XT, that's the traffic density, the vehicles per M. Obviously, V is velocity. And then G, gravitational acceleration, and then M is the average vehicle mass. So now substituting the F of XT. Now, since we have that, we're substituting into the equation E, and then again, 0 is in the bottom in the last equation of the slide. 0 is on the bottom, L is on the top, 0 is on the bottom, T is on the top. And then K times P of XT times V times G times M dx and dt. So this is describing basically how this energy can be outputted to different places, right? So we have the energy from the piezoelectric elements, and then the force F is what we've substituted. So now, basically, this equation, it can describe how everything is being outputted. And meeting will end in 10 minutes. Now, every freaking time.
Okay.
So now, I move you guys aside again.
You can hit minimize on that. The little, yeah, there you go.
Oh, that's cool.
Get rid of it. There you go.
Interesting. I can see you guys over there. Okay, so now, so that equation that we just solved for, we'll go back to that if I can. So this equation right here describes how the power is being output. But now we run into the optimization problem, which I thought of because I'm so smart. So, so to maximize the energy, we have to impose constraints on the actual traffic flow, right? The conservation of vehicles. The total vehicles over time interval t, so we'll have t as the time interval, and the road length we'll call that L. So now we have another confusing equation. So it's basically the same as this one. Nope. Same as this one. Same as the bottom equation, bottom right. But now instead we're going into this again, 0 is to L, 0 on the bottom, L on top, 0 on the bottom, T on the top, and then the traffic flow times dx dt equals N. Now N is the new variable that we have. N is the total number of vehicles, right? So again, that's what our conservation of vehicles is. This is our optimization problem. So in our traffic flow dynamics, the change in the traffic density over time, it has to be governed by this continuity equation. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. So now we have this kind of confusing equation, but what it is, it's two fractions, right? And then, so those two fractions, what they're doing is this is actually, it's kind of governing the traffic flow, right? So if we have our optimization problem, what this equation is doing is basically, it's kind of solving it, but then what we have to do, which I'll get into in a minute, is use the Lagrange multipliers, right? So from that equation, what we have to do is use Lagrange multipliers. And for reference, the method of Lagrange multipliers, it's mainly a technique that's used in calculus to find the local maxima and minima of actual function subjects. So that way, because it's subject to one or more constraints, right? That's what the Lagrange multipliers is used for. It's to find the minima and maxima of those constraints. And it's mainly used in optimization problems such as this, where the constraints are expressed as the equations, as that equation describes the continuity equation. So using that Lagrange multipliers, it makes everything a heck of a lot easier, right? So now the functional maximize becomes, so now we have the minimum and the maxima. What we need to maximize becomes, so it gets little again, same equation basically as this equation on the bottom. But so now it's the Lagrange multiplier equals the, again, 0 on the bottom, L on top, 0 on the bottom, T on the top, and then now we have K times P times V times G times M dx and dt. But now, instead of that, now we're subtracting with a minimum. So now we have lambda times the integral, again, 0 on the bottom, L on the top, 0 on the bottom, T on the top, so those two integrals, then times the actual traffic flow, times dx, then dt, what we're solving with respect to, minus the total number of vehicles. So now, that's our optimization problem, right? So basically that's our traffic problem, that's our giant equation using that method. So now, again, what we can do though, we can simplify that equation a lot by taking a derivative with respect to p. So from there, we have sigma L over sigma P, again, dad, equals K times V times G times M minus lambda equals 0. So now we have all those, and now, again, just basic algebra here, we're solving for P, right? So what do we do? We have to divide. So now what we get on the other side is a total number of vehicles times K times V times G times M, and that's what our traffic flow is, right? So that's our optimized equation. But again, what does that mean? So if lambda is constant, the traffic flow is uniform. So that implies that maximizing the energy requires a steady flow of vehicles at a constant speed. So that's what that means basically. So when lambda is constant, traffic flow is uniform. That's what that equation optimized for us. So when velocity varies with the position or displacement x or time t, and again, as we use by the Lorentz-Kutta method, the traffic flow is determining the relationship between displacement and time, right? So it must adapt. For example, so if vehicles are slowing down in traffic, the traffic jams increase. That's the relationship. Vehicles slow down, traffic jams increase. And then the same thing, when vehicles speed up, there's no more traffic jams, the traffic jams decrease, right? Or accidents increase. That's another factor. But in that relationship, what it does is it boosts the piezoelectric energy, but it still risks inefficiencies in the thermoelectric and triboelectric system. So it's kind of like what is it? Choose your thing. I don't know. Choose your
Eventually.
sure. So that. So basically, this analysis that we have from the optimization, it helps engineers design these road energy systems, the civil engineering part of it now, by regulating the traffic. So now traffic lights and smart poles can be used to adjust the flow to maintain optimal P of X over T. So then that traffic flow is determining the relationship between that displacement and the time. So that makes it optimal, right? So that's one solution. Second one is segmenting these energy harvesters in different collecting points of these city grids, right? So these high density regions, like intersections going from West Third to Third Avenue or things like that, one big intersection, right? Um, or going into Times Square, one of those big intersections, you have energy harvester, and then that's where these layers come in, and then our optimization problem is solved, right? So the high density regions, like the intersections again, you get the piezoelectric arrays, and then high speed stretches, like highways and things like that. They get the tribal electric systems or on bridges, things like that. And then, so that was my brain. So this, all this is what it's doing is it's describing the optimization of our traffic flow and then how that can be optimized through these relationships between displacement and time. So I thought that was really cool because we have our solution for it, the all the three layers, but then how to optimize. That's what we solved. This. So now, in conclusion of this amazing presentation, so the energy harvesting roads, they can demonstrate the synergy of the piezoelectric, thermoelectric, and triboelectric nanogenerator systems, which is really cool. Calculus and physics, they can optimize these traffic dynamics in certain ways that we didn't think was possible. So now what I would say is, here's my question. How would you contribute to building this future? Right?
Okay. So for the piezoelectric crystals or materials, it seems like the most important part of that equation is the coefficient of the materials
That's determining
for how much. Say again.
that's determining how much power can be output. So yeah.
Right. So how do we get to more efficient materials, piezoelectric materials, or is there a limit to how efficient they can be?
There is a limit. So this materials, so like the main material that would be work best in this scenario for actual roads would be lead zircon and titanate. Because the other materials, there's three main materials and other miscellaneous ones, but three main materials, lead zircon and titanate is the one that's the most rigid, and so it'll handle a car passing by it, acting like a pressure plate. There's another one that I was using in like my shoe insole. That's one of the ideas was polyiodine fluorine, but that one's more. It's basically like bending material, kind of like a shoe insole almost. So like if you can imagine how a shoe insole bends, that's kind of how that would be used for a shoe insole, the pressure plate and creating energy from there, walking, right? Well, on a road, that wouldn't really be much good. So and it would just be crushed under a car's pressure. So there are other miscellaneous ones that could potentially work, but none of them would be as reliable and as efficient as electric and titanate. So that's probably the max efficiency you can get. However, you can still add more power and things like that and have other solutions using these other materials. But yeah, I think that's it.
And this solution seems like it almost invites traffic, which no human likes. Nobody likes to be in traffic or to sit in traffic. So can this work even on roads that are more sparsely traveled, or at least traveled in a way in which people don't cuss out each other because they're stuck in 8 a.m. traffic on the way to work?
Yes, it can be definitely used in different scenarios like that. For example, like having like Wyoming. But the main concept of it is being in a place like a big city like New York City, obviously with these city grids with collector points. Now that being said, they don't have to be at intersections. So then you could have it in a random spot on the highway and a car running over it will still create the energy. But it's a good question though. And yeah, it doesn't invite traffic, I'd say, but I think it works better with traffic. So traffic is what makes it thrive. But yes, it could definitely be used like a more sparsely traveled area.
And this will be my last question before so I don't monopolize time. But what about like, can this work with foot traffic in cities and sidewalks? Because you think about a place like New York City, people walk a lot, people drive, but people also walk a lot and take subways. And so there's a lot of, I'm not going to use the right words here. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of energy being created by people taking steps in sidewalk and walking around the city. So do you think this would be a solution that could be used for more pedestrian applications?
Definitely. So that's actually a great idea I didn't think of. So my idea was for the insoles when people walk, they have it for their own shoe insoles. But having it just on sidewalks, using not just ones like leather being tighten it, now you could go into piezoelectric materials such as polyiodine fluorine for a higher piezoelectric coefficient, but it wouldn't be crushing the car's weight, right? So that could actually be actually be a good idea to actually generate power and be the same concept of having them at like intersections like soft walks, things like that on sidewalk, and then still being outputted in the same power source. So yeah, it's definitely good. That could definitely work. Yeah, it's actually a good idea. Mhm. Yeah, that's actually a great idea too. Having bicycles.
How did you come up with this idea? Tell us, where did it start? What inspired you?
Inspired.
Give us a story.
Uh, one day I wanted to go outside very badly, but I had to do a one pager, and so I was like, oh, perfect, portable battery. Because I was thinking, because we had a power outage not long before that, and we didn't have a lot of portable batteries, right? So my phone died, and so I was thinking like a portable battery, and then I started thinking about how I forgot to do my run that day, and so then I was thinking like, whoa, you run, then you create energy. So I was like, oh, how would that work? And then I looked into it, figured out what piezoelectric technology is, and then made the idea, made one pager. Rest is history. Kind of just like a bunch of ideas in my head that I just formed together.
So grounding you and making you write one pagers is beneficial. You can hear Dad now.
Well, thank me later.
Do you think you could create this on a small scale, Cameron? Like almost like a model to test out the theories, and the equations, and the math? Or does this have to be something that is implemented at human scale for you to see if it actually works?
So,
Basically, could you do a science experiment and make this work?
yeah. So as you can see in the picture on the screen, that's piezoelectric technology right there. So that's leather made. I'm sorry, that's polyiodine fluorine, right? And that's like a pressure plate almost. So that's what the wires are connected to a power source. And what they're doing is they obviously apply pressure with them, and then from there it's actually creating energy. So you can make it like a little science project almost. Then obviously I'm talking about is more big scale or real
Matchbox cars,
Matchbox.
like use Matchbox cars to.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Take like a Hot Wheels track.
yeah, exactly. Oh,
Matchbox,
that'd be
Hot
cool.
Wheels,
That'd be a
same
cool project.
stuff.
Having like one of those like a motor and then like a loopy loop and having like that'd be cool.
Or even maybe create like a mini track scale for people to do like RC cars over and see if it works at that scale. There you go. Now you have your master's thesis. Lauren, I know you have questions.
Anyone else have questions?
Laura, questions?
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's dark where I am. You won't be able to see me anyways.
You don't want to see Lauren's face in the morning. It's fine.
Do I have any questions? Come back to me.
Dad, any questions?
Well, while my beautiful granddaughter is pondering a question, what's the maximum power that can be generated with this system?
Okay. So the maximum power generated. So talking about the whole system or just the piezoelectric?
The whole system, as you envision it at this point.
So obviously there are different sources of power, right? So piezoelectric are in volts, and then thermoelectric outputting it in watts, things like that. But and then columns for the triboelectric nano generators. But the maximum amount of power, um, thinking about the heaviest car there could be or a really busy day, the maximum amount of power, obviously, the maximum piezoelectric coefficient we're going to have right now is 0.2 from lead zirconate titanate. So that's a 0.2 for that. And then in our equation, from there, we have, let's say, the length of the strip is longer. Let's say it's around like a 10-meter long piezoelectric strip, right, for the layers. And then let's say we have a truck weighing, putting 28,000 newtons of force on the scale. So from there, you're creating a lot of power. That'd probably be around 10,000 volts of energy. That's just piezoelectric. Going forward to something like the thermoelectric, then you're having things, the actual power output using delta T with the gradient of the surface area, sigma like that, having everything outputting it in watts now. The maximum amount of power you could get would probably be around close to, if you're converting everything to volts, would be close to around 20,000 volts of energy from the system. So it'd be a lot of it. If it was like the right, if it was optimized. As we have in our optimization equation as well, if there's the correct optimization between the displacement and the time and that traffic flow ratio, then yeah, that could be the maximum power energy to output theoretically.
Okay, thanks. I'm trying to look at it from the point of view of an alternate source of electricity
Yeah.
for our system
Okay.
and how practical this might be.
Exactly.
So, like for example, could you, with this, if you put a system like this in New York, could you power the whole city, or would you only be able to maybe power the streetlights, or I guess there's no telephone booths anymore.
Sadly.
Could you power like up to? Could you power the subway system with it? Could you power what do you think is the highest amount of technology that you could power with this system?
Okay. So let's say theoretically, a we have these three layers, right, at every major intersection, and then also midway through each long street, right? So we have one middle of West 37th Street, middle of like every street, right, and then every major intersection as well, from west to east, things like that. So let's say we have all those on these different at these different collecting points. They're all going. So each type of energy is being generated is going to a different power source. So, for example, the triboelectric nano generators, those are going to things underground. So then those could power things like subway stations or get faster rails, right? So that could be something that actually power subways if we created enough energy. And again, the displacement time ratio was optimized. Could definitely power that. Wouldn't power the whole city per se, but let's say there's a power outage, right? And we're not focusing on just central power grid. So the piezoelectric, it's going to substations that are either being used for immediate use for things like streetlights, or it's being stored into an energy grid that could be used for like a power outage, let's say. And it's not one centralized, all decentralized in different substations. So from there, it could definitely be used to power building, not the whole city, but it could definitely be really good application. Things like that.
Okay.
All right, I have a question.
Okay.
So keeping with the New York theme, what's the least amount of pressure that you could pick up with this? Like, could it pick up the rats scurrying around New York City?
Get off of New York City.
So, so there's obviously different applications of it. So if we go back to Christopher's idea of on the sidewalks, right, that would pick up a rat. Now, or obviously it wouldn't create that much energy, but that would be the type of thing that would actually create energy from that. Now, if it's on the road, like I was saying, at these intersections, no, it's not going to do that. I mean, as we're seeing here, these examples are 10,000 newtons of force, things like that. Here's electric coefficient and the surface area. It's going to create like not even a recognizable amount of power for wrap series through it. It won't do anything really. So it's mainly on the smaller scale ones, like for example, the insole idea for that same material on the sidewalks. That's how you could create power from just a wrap randomly sort of not much, but again, but yeah, that could be a way.
Gotcha. With all of the athletic complexes that are within most of the cities within North America, could you also use this uh, technology or yeah, technology? Because I know that you can create energy, you know, from a person cycling on like a stationary bike or whatever for a short amount of time. Um, but could you take this and use that to power, you know, like cities, what you're saying?
So yeah, so you could definitely use these three layers power different things, like what you're saying. And you could definitely, it wouldn't power like again like a whole giant city like New York City, but if it's somewhere again,
No, I'm thinking that, like, think of all the athletic complexes and how many athletes are there and they're training them. Need to use them, you know, give back to the community.
Plug them into
okay,
the matrix, right?
Exactly. Harvest their energy.
theoretically, yeah. I mean,
I bet that is psychologically.
next question.
This looks like more of a backup system as opposed to a primary system.
So that's definitely a good point. I mean, for now, like in the state that the world is right now, centralized power grids, they're more this would be more reliable, I would say, but centralized power grids is how cities are being powered right now. And in cases of blackouts, things like that, this could be a backup system, but it could also be an additional system, right? So not just being like for example, centralized power system powers buildings, skyscrapers, powers things like but this could use to be powered like streetlights, for example. So having these cars run by it and these intersections gives electric materials, outputting the substation powering streetlights. So it could kind of be I could see as like a backup system, but also it's like as a as like a sidekick system.
Part of the problem is that if you start expanding it to powering cities, you're talking about power factors
Mm.
and the fact that you may not get the maximum power delivered to the cities because you're dealing with power factors. And that becomes a big problem, as it is already with electrical systems, electrical power systems.
Definitely. That's a really good point actually. Obviously, it couldn't be powered use to power an entire city, but that's actually a good point about power factors. That's definitely something that would be going into consideration if it's actually this is all theoretical, obviously, but if this would actually be like something that would be used, power factors be into consideration. How
Let's back up 1 second. Does someone want to explain to the rest of us peons what power factors are?
Explain. Power factor.
what Chris saying?
Who wants to
For
I don't know what power. We don't. I don't know what power. You and Grandpa know what power factors are.
explain this
Uh,
term?
Maybe,
Google.
maybe Sandy's parents know what power factors are. Well, yeah, I could have Googled Cameron's whole presentation, but the point is for us to learn from him.
You're putting your brother on the spot.
Exactly. A little pressure.
Pressure like the piezoelectric stuff. No, but power factors. Wait, you don't know what a power factor is, Chris?
I don't. Explain it to
Okay,
me.
so we're explaining for everybody else.
Yes.
Okay. Well, think of it as like kind of like a limit. So do you think that addressing my mom, you think that just like based off of this, it would power a whole city, like on paper?
No, I think it has specific use cases.
Okay. So yeah, that's what I was kind of saying. So to power a whole city, there's different things that go into it. So obviously there's a centralized power grid, right? But then for this to actually work, it has to be able to have to be implemented in the entire city into an entire city grid, and then basically be creating more power than that central power grid, right? But there's limits to that. So there's different areas and such where power isn't being go into a substation, let's say. So you have to build substations of the city inside of the ground, going through subway stations, right? So a lot of it is kind of like an overload almost, you would think.
So a factor, so it's like a multiple or a limit, the power factor? Is that what you're defining?
Well, I haven't dealt with it in quite a while myself, but I'll try and give it a rough explanation of it. Most AC electricity is based upon a sine wave, and I'm assuming most of you know what a sine wave looks like. And power factor would mean that the sine wave of one signal has to match the sine wave of another signal if it's going to get maximum deliverance of power.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have the sine wave from one system coming in to meet the sine wave of another system, if they don't match, you have a power I'll say a power factor. It's they're banging against one another. So you don't get the maximum deliverance of power because they're competing against one another.
Okay.
That's a rough explanation of it.
So it almost sounds like an optimization problem like Cameron was talking about earlier, where you have to make sure that the amount of power in at least both systems is somewhat congruent for you to have the maximum efficiency.
Chris, you just earned an 80 on the test.
Oh, look at me.
Still not good enough though. You need hundreds.
So here's
You have a good comprehension of what your brother was talking about.
I listened. I actually listened. I wasn't just scrolling on Facebook or Amazon. I did fill out my FAFSA form in the beginning of it, but I was already working on that by the time you started, so I'll admit to that.
So here's where this gets interesting. So yeah, you can power cities using Lorentz rat logic, but think of this at a planetary level, because everything that you said, very interesting, good innovative thought, definitely an A level grade. But everything that you're talking about is related to gravitational waves and the energy that can be captured therefrom. So the link that I sent you earlier today, that you'll read later today, has to do more with electrical engineering. The next generation of electrical engineering has to do with quantum mechanics, flat out period. All of this stuff is already in the past, but it still is needed at the planetary level. But consider a space journey. We're now taking journeys to Mars, Jupiter, whatever solar system. Gravitational waves are pervasive and probably one of the strongest natural occurrences, unless you look at quasar energy, space. But the reality of taking something like this as a framework and saying, okay, now we can capture gravitational waves by putting these type of couplers in atmospheres and captured atmospheres, or satellites. And then how do you then take that energy as gravitational waves emanate between bodies, passing meteors, rotating around the sun? There's constant gravitational waves. So can this then serve as a framework for how you capture natural extant gravitational waves and can produce that into energy that somehow gets transmitted to the surface to basically power planets and or passing, spaceships as they come by maybe need regeneration if for whatever reason nuclear power isn't being used or something else.
That's all theoretical, Chris. That's your dad. It's theoretical.
But it's on future generations such as Cameron's to try to make the theoretical into the non-theoretical.
That's true. So Cameron, take it. I'm trying to give you an out.
All right, so what's his grade?
What's his grade?
We're getting Okay, one by one.
I don't know.
Hmm.
What other factors would you have to account for with this? Like, are there any limitations in terms of, if people just suddenly become sedentary as we are becoming more sedentary?
Oh, we're
Or,
not talking about social sciences, Lauren. This is pure sciences.
I can bring social science into whatever I want, Christopher.
What city is the new smoking?
But like, what limitations are there for this, technology? Give
I
me at
think,
least like two or three.
well, I'd say the main limitation is that it relies heavily on people commuting from community to community, right? So if New York City was suddenly abandoned, again, the power's not gonna do anything, right? Because what this is, the main problem of it is you have to have somebody running over a specific spot. So that's something that can be optimized in the future, though. So we have an optimization problem in full force already because to get that full displacement ratio, the traffic flow ratio between obviously displacement and time, right? Have to have the right time and the right displacement or place where they're actually the cars are going through at the right place, right time, traffic flows right, optimization, get the full amount of energy. So that's one of the main problems, right? It's kind of like a simulation of random variables. So these cars are going by at random times, random places. There could be an accident, right? So it's mainly random and based upon people's actions. That's probably the main limitation. And another one, obviously, as Grandpa was talking about, is the power limitation, the power factor, right? Is how it wouldn't be able to be used on large scale levels without further optimization and further on actual intervention. But that's the limitations.
Three limitations. What's the third one?
He said two.
I'm upping it.
You did say 2 to 3, Lauren.
Yeah, but we want to go above and beyond.
Oh, boo.
Chris is using his lawyer brain. Now use it saved.
Chris, great.
I am going to give you. I'm going to give you an A. I'm
Yeah.
going to give
A
you an
plus or A
A.
minus?
I'm going to give him. I'm going to give him an A, not an A plus. An A plus to me. I'll tell you what an A plus to me would have been. An A plus to me also would have had a slide that considered the and you're 13, so you're probably not thinking about all this. But the human and the social uh, restraints that Lauren was talking about. So, for example, at the beginning of the slide, you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that part of the solution was meant to combat, the growing problem of our reliance on fossil fuels and the damage that does to the climate. What you didn't mention, though, what you could have mentioned to tie that into the presentation even more, is that this solution also supposes that people are still driving cars, right, and doing those activities on streets. And driving cars either means that the cars are electric or they're gas. And right now they're gas. And if they're electric, you could have said, well, if we're relying still on cars driving on streets, and we want to move to a future without fossil fuels, this also could be a solution for having sustainable power demand for those electric cars, which will be used to power this power generation system. So it's almost like a self-regenerating cycle. You need electricity for the cars in turn generate the electricity on the streets, that in turn is captured and stored in batteries, which people can use to charge their cars, rather than relying on fossil fuel generation for the electricity as we do now. But you'd need a whole bunch more context to be thinking about stuff like that. But that would be an A plus. But you get an A.
But to your point, Chris, earlier point, this is not social science.
No, it's not. It's not. But good scientists also consider the social ramifications, because you can create the work, but it won't get used if people don't think it has utility.
Well, Cameron, before you respond, from this grandfather's point of view, I give you an A, but I also give Chris an A. I give you an A for keeping your audience tuned in, and I give Chris an A for absorbing at least some of what you've said.
But this isn't about me. This is about Cameron.
That's why I gave both of you an A. Mr. Lawyer.
You are the last grader.
Are we grading based on presentation or just on the information presented?
Give the boy an A, Lauren. Quit playing.
No, I want all the factors. Christopher, we had to compete against each other, remember? He has no one to compete against.
Oh,
On the basis of innovative thinking, to a point that Chris made, delivery level relative to age and Asian style.
I would give an stop looking at me like that, Cameron. I would give an A, like a 96 or 7.
I'll go beat her up, Cameron. She should have given you 100.
Cameron, Chris, you can't find me. And that's an A plus. I would say probably a 97.
Good, so he's earned his A-level gifts.
He has.
Though obviously the selection where he may get the
Oh no!
diaper.
Oh no!
No, he did. You know what? He did good enough to where there should be no mysteries. This was an amazing presentation. I learned a lot. Have a lot to think about. There should be no mysteries in his selection. The council has spoken, Dad.
I'm his client.
That's it.
It's not as fun as like when you guys were all here and he made you guys pick like between the different gifts, and then like Jason would get the one that was intended for Chris, and then you guys had to fight amongst yourselves to figure it out.
Oh, wait. We have our final judges going back in. So grade is still up for grabs. Oh wait, we can't connect to audio.
Problem here is more gratuitous grandparenting of grades. It's giving up. Everybody gets an A. You get an A, Chris. You get an A.
So for this presentation.
So when do we get to give B's out though?
B's when he turns 16 or 17, we can give out B's. They don't have enough context.
Can you hear Ma?
Yeah, I can hear it. It came back on.
It's time for Cameron's grade. What would you give him?
Me?
Yep.
A plus.
That's your grandmother speaking for you.
Hey, what grade would you give Cameron?
What?
What grade would you give Cameron?
A plus.
He said A plus too.
There you go.
Sorry, my computer died, so I had to plug it into the plug. So, so what for his grades?
Slight criticisms.
I mean, I'm going to give you an A plus, and here's why. You didn't actually do this last minute. You've been planning this for some time.
Oh, see. Oh, okay.
I talked to him last night, and usually he's up all night the night before. And I said, "Did you, do it? And what do you have to work on?" He said, "No, I'm finished. I've been working on this for at least a couple months." So he's put a lot of thought into it and was proactive about it. So he was just putting last minute graphics in this morning, so to put touch-ups on it. So I gave him an A, not for just the content and the presentation, but for the preparation.
Okay, my I train's A plus then. That's impressive.
You already got an A plus from me.
I will channel Jay by
I stick by my A.
give an A. I don't think Jay would give an A plus. Probably give it 96.
Well, let's see. That's
You know what that means, guys? You know what that means?
that's 3 A pluses and 3 A's. No, no.
Star, like what is it if you're in America's Got Talent? You get the
Oh yeah. I don't know, but you know what this means, guys? You know what this means?
What does it mean?
I'm risen like a sigma.
Oh,
Mine.
yeah, no, that's a B now. Sorry.
Yeah, actually,
You
D.
you were so close, Cameron. You were so close. Should have just walked off the stage.
You have
but
failed in the eyes of the Robinsons.
yeah, that was cringe. That was cringe, dude. Yeah, but good job. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for showing us that there is ways in the future that we can get off of fossil fuels and cool technologies that we should be exploring. So
And that rats have something to contribute to society.
yes, and that rats have a place in New York City. They finally have a place.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Love
Happy
you.
holidays, y'all.
Whatever.
Whatever.
Love you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye,
Adios,
everybody.
amigos.
Ciao, everyone.
And it's so on.